What's a small act of kindness you did as a teen that no one ever noticed? I was 13 when I first noticed Carlos walking to school alone. He lived 3 houses down from us in our apartment complex, and I'd see him trudging along the sidewalk every morning as I headed to the middle school. He couldn't have been more than 6, this tiny kid with a backpack almost as big as he was, sometimes wearing mismatched shoes or with his shirt buttoned wrong. Our schools were in the same direction, his elementary school about 4 blocks before my middle school. One rainy day, I left earlier than usual. I spotted Carlos at the corner, getting soaked because he didn't have an umbrella. Without thinking much about it, I walked over and held mine over both of us. I asked if he went to PG Elementary, and he nodded, looking at the ground. I told him I was heading that way and asked if he wanted to walk together. That first day, he barely said 3 words to me, but I noticed he was always late. The elementary school bell had usually already rung by the time he got there. The next day, I deliberately left early again and found him at the same spot. Again, we walked together. I started leaving my house at 7:30 every morning, timing it so I'd accidentally run into Carlos. I never told my parents what I was doing. They just thought I was being responsible by getting to school early. After about 2 weeks, Carlos started waiting for me at the corner. He'd stand there shifting from foot to foot, his shoelaces often untied. I taught him the bunny ears method for tying them properly. Winter hit hard that year. I noticed Carlos didn't have proper gloves, just thin cotton ones with holes. I had birthday money saved, so I bought him waterproof mittens from the discount store. I pretended I found them in my closet and they were too small for me. My hands aren't cold anymore, he told me the next day, showing how he can make snowballs without getting wet. Once, 3 fifth-grade boys tried to take Carlos's backpack, shoving him around on the playground before school. I was dropping him off when I saw it happen. I marched over and told them my dad was the new assistant principal at the middle school, a complete lie, and that I'd make sure they got detention when they arrived next year if they didn't leave him alone. They backed off. Carlos asked me if they would come back, looking up with wide eyes. I assured him they wouldn't if they were smart, trying to sound more confident than I felt. After that incident, I started walking him all the way to his classroom door instead of just to the playground entrance. His teacher, Ms. Julia, noticed after a few days and asked if I was his sister. I just said I was a neighbor. She smiled and thanked me for making sure he arrived safely. I wondered if she knew his situation at home. One day in March, I arrived at our meeting spot to find Carlos wasn't there. I waited 10 minutes, then went to knock on his apartment door. No answer. I tried again the next day, and Darlene answered, looking exhausted. Carlos had been home with strep throat. I asked if they needed anything from the store. She hesitated, then asked if I could pick up his prescription since the pharmacy was on my way home from school. I did, and also brought over my old Game Boy with Tetris for Carlos to play while recovering. When he returned to school the following week, he handed me a drawing he'd made of 2 stick figures walking together, one tall and one short, with "Thank you, Lola" written in wobbly letters across the top. I folded it carefully and kept it in my math textbook. During our walks, Carlos gradually told me about his life. His dad had left when he was 3. He didn't remember him much. His mom worked 2 jobs before getting the night shift at the hospital, which paid better but meant strange hours. He spent weekends at his grandmother's apartment across town. He wanted a dog, but knew they couldn't have one in their building. As the school year neared its end, I started teaching Carlos how to read the wall clock properly. I also showed him how to make his own breakfast, just cereal and a banana. But it was something. I wrote down our walking route on a piece of paper, marking the crossings where he needed to be extra careful. The last week of school, I made sure Carlos had his end-of-year forms filled out. His mom had signed them, but he'd forgotten to put them back in his folder. On the final day, I walked him all the way to his classroom door instead of just the playground. I told him to have a good summer as I was about to turn and hurry to my own school. He surprised me by throwing his arms around my waist. "Thanks for being my big sister," he whispered. I didn't tell him I wouldn't be walking with him the next year. My family was moving across town in July because our landlord was selling our building. I wouldn't be there to walk Carlos to school anymore, and I worried about him being on his own again. 5 years later, I was working my first job when a woman approached the checkout desk. She looked familiar, but I couldn't place her until I saw her name tag, Darlene. She asked if I was Lola, Carlos's walking buddy. I nodded, surprised she knew who I was. She told me that Carlos had eventually told her everything. She mentioned she had always wondered who was making sure he got to school on time that year, and that his teacher had noticed he never missed the morning bell anymore. I said I didn't do that much, feeling embarrassed. What I never told anyone was that my own mom had disappeared when I was 7. For that whole year, I walked Carlos to school because I remembered what it was like to be small and alone, trying to figure things out by yourself. I wasn't trying to be heroic. I just knew what he needed because I needed the same thing once.